2005, and the Cotswolds is rocked by a dark taboo. A girl reveals she's suffered almost 2 decades of abuse at the hands of her foster mother, Eunice Spry.
She knew what she was doing and she enjoyed doing what she was doing. She got a lot of pleasure from doing what she was doing.
Spry presented herself to the world as a caring, loving mother.
I've just left the hospital once to go to the funeral, and the ambulance took me and brought me back, and I've not left since.
But behind closed doors, she was a violent and sadistic abuser. And there would be more shocking revelations. The girl reports there are other children held captive in a farm she calls the torture farm.
Eunice takes them to the brink of death.
It was pure sadistic torture.
Britain's Darkest Taboos reveals the shocking true stories behind the most horrific acts of familial crime, including murder.
He stood up and licked the blood off the knife and he spat down her body.
Torture.
People call him an animal, but he's not an animal. An animal wouldn't do that to another animal.
And abuse.
I probably should have died, and I tell you what, I wish I had.
April 2007. Foster mum Eunice Spry is jailed after being found guilty of a catalogue of offences, many relating to child cruelty and spanning 20 years.
His Honour Judge Simon Darwell-Smith told Spry this was the worst case of its kind he'd ever heard in his 40 years' experience. He told her she was guilty of sadistic torture.
What led a mother to inflict such horrendous abuse on the children she was caring for? "20 years earlier, in Tewkesbury, and Eunice Spry is caring for 2 children, Judith, who's her biological daughter, and Charlotte, whom she adopted as a baby. In 1984, she begins to privately foster children, some who have had a difficult start to their lives. 3 children she was to foster are Victoria, Aloma, and Christopher.
My earliest memories with Eunice are overall, the feeling is happy. I remember playing in the garden, I remember playing with the dog. It was exciting.
She seemed really warm. I mean, warm enough for me to go and sit on her lap and feel comfortable.
She was obsessed with making clothes for us all, so we all liked to look the same. Just to show, she wanted to look like she was just a perfect mother.
But before long, all 3 children begin to feel uneasy in their new family home.
The house was never clean. She was like a hoarder. There was just stuff everywhere. You couldn't see anything. It was dirty. She had animals everywhere. It was very chaotic, very hectic.
And it quickly becomes apparent that Judith and Charlotte are treated very differently.
They had their own bedrooms, fed sort of better food, toys, and I was being treated as if I wasn't a person. I had no right.
She was made to eat all bran with linseed on it, and Eunice said that was because she was mentally ill.
Despite what Eunice says, Victoria is not mentally ill. But why is Eunice, deemed the perfect foster mum, being so cruel? Laura Richards is a criminal behaviour analyst working with police forces across the UK. She's been visiting the area where Spry lived and looking into her background.
It probably does come down to something that she felt that the 3 children that came in later on, well, they were slightly older, and the types of families that they'd come from, in her mind's eye, she's cleansing them or she's training them and parenting them, but it's in a very abusive and aggressive and sadistic way compared to how she behaves to the other 2.
And it's not long before Eunice begins to escalate her control and reveal her draconian ideas about bringing up these vulnerable children.
She brought some shopping into the kitchen, and she'd got sort of like various cat foods and dog foods and soup and baked beans or what have you. And I was a little toddler and I took all the labels off it. as little ones might do. And she just went mad. She went mad at me that she said she could no longer see what was in what can. And she said, you pick a can and whatever's in it, you eat it. I was put in the high chair and I was tied down and it was cat food and I was retching and crying. I was a little tiny baby. I was retching and crying and I'd sick it back up and she'd make me eat the sick up. She always had to have the upper hand and had to, whatever she said went. And that was my first real proper memory.
But what's going on in Eunice's mind? Why does she want to foster these children, only to treat them this way? Psychologist Emma Kenny deals with child abuse in her clinics, and she's been looking into this family arrangement.
The mentality of almost gathering children so that you appear a positive person suggests that you have a level of manipulation within that, and Eunice Spry undoubtedly was a manipulative person from the onset. She's essentially ensuring that she has a group of very vulnerable children within her power.
Eunice presents herself as a deeply religious Jehovah's Witness, but behind closed doors, her religion is another tool of abuse.
She said to me that I was just such a bad child that when I died at Armageddon, Satan's going to come and get you and the bird's going to peck your eyes out because you're just such a bad child. And I remember as a little girl, night after night, I'd go to sleep and I'd wake up, I'd wet the bed and I'd wake up screaming of this nightmare. She literally put the fear of God into me.
She thought I was demonised or that I was working in Satan's name and that we were the devil's offspring, and always told that Satan looked after his own.
It's really important to understand that children believe adults, and when Eunice was telling her children that they were bad, that they were evil, that they required being punished so that they could be good again, it creates abject terror in a child, which means that you have control over them. They would have accepted that she was telling them the truth, and that is the biggest abuse of all.
That's really hard to comprehend when you're 6 years old. You start to question everything, every decision you make, and she'll say, well, this is missing, someone stole this. And you'll start thinking, well, maybe I did it, but I just don't know I did it. And, maybe the devil made me do it and I don't even know it. And it was a dark time in my life, and to have to question your own sanity as a young kid is horrific.
I think I kind of knew it wasn't right, but I thought it was right for me, and I was always told my parents didn't want me, and I had to be grateful to even be in her presence, and I honestly felt that's all I deserved at the time.
Every child believes that they want to be loved by their mother, and they have no understanding of what her behaviour should be like as an ideal parent. They just accept that this is what a mother does.
Christopher, Aloma and Victoria are living in fear. But Eunice isn't just emotionally abusing these children, she wants to physically punish them too.
One of her favourite punishments in the early days was getting us to run up and down stairs continuously. And I remember once it was because the Marmite had gone missing, and I liked Marmite, so I was the one who was going to straight away blamed. So I had to run up and down stairs until I couldn't do it anymore, and then got punched in the head for it. And the Marmite was found at the back of the cupboard. It wasn't missing. There was no sorry. There was no cuddle. It was just, oh, we found it.
Or another thing she'd do, she'd make me stand with my back against the living room door with my legs out, and I'd stay up for hours, and my feet would slip on the carpet from sweat staying up there so long. And she'd be watching the telly, and she'd have this ruler, a wooden ruler, and she'd swing around on her finger, and she would smack my toes. And as a child, I lived with bruises under all my nails and bleeding. But she'd then scream at me that I'd got blood all over her carpets, and then she'd kick me in the mouth for that.
We had to sort of stand there rigid and not move, and it was really difficult to do that. I didn't understand why she was doing it. I was told it was because I couldn't sleep. I thought I had a sleeping problem. And that's why she was making me do it. And then when she was asleep, then I'd sit down and she'd catch me sat down. She'd be like, no, you can stand up for another 2 hours now. And she'd I found it really strange how she'd just go back to sleep and leave us there.
As they reach school age, all three are mixing with other children. And Victoria in particular begins to see a whole different type of life. But there is no escape from the hold Eunice has over their lives.
My mum would come here, sit outside in the car every lunchtime to see whether I was talking to any other children, because I was forbidden to associate or play with any other children. And if the dinner ladies told me to, I would sometimes go and play with them. She'd ask me when she collected me home from school if I'd spoken to anybody at lunchtime, and I'd say no. And she'd call me a liar, and I'd get beaten for speaking or playing with the other children. And she used to say to me, I have a magic eye, I can see what you're doing, don't you lie to me.
What I'd have to do is pretend that I didn't see her and carry on playing. If I did sort of like make eye contact with her, then she would say that that was the devil inside me and that he was telling me that she was there. So I used to get nervous and end up just playing behind the hedge with my friends.
Eunice may think she's in control, but the children would be unable to hide their misery for long.
She told me not to tell the teachers anything and that she would know. I was questioned several times by my teacher. I wouldn't tell her much, said I was happy.
Whatever I did at school, whether I did or didn't, they were always reporting back, and she was always saying I was always causing trouble for her. I was always getting her into trouble. Now I realise it's because they could see signs of abuse, really, and they were kind of questioning her about it. She just knew that the net was closing in and she had to take me out, and it was very dangerous when she took me out. Then I was away from a lot of people who could see what was going on.
Taken from school, hidden from the authorities, Eunice has the children all to herself. And now no one can see them. It would only be a matter of time before Eunice would take her cruelty to the next level.
I remember being frightened, properly frightened for the first time. It was one of those moments I'm probably never going to forget.
In the early 1990s, 3 children fear for their lives. Victoria, Aloma and Christopher are living in a council home in Tewkesbury with a cruel and abusive foster mum, Eunice Spry.
I was retching and crying, and I'd sick it back up, and she'd make me sick up. She always had to have the upper hand and had to, whatever she said went.
Eunice has taken the children out of school, away from anyone who can save them. But this is just the start of her reign of terror. She tells them they're to move away from the council estate to an isolated farm on the edge of the picture postcard village of Eckington.
Moving to the farm was strange because it happened during the night. I remember it being like really old. It's definitely got a horrible, horrible atmosphere there, that just a feeling of like a really eerie, nasty feeling.
Had no central heating or anything, and it was very old-fashioned. It was Ray-Bans and everything. And it used to stink, and there was as well stress as you walked in, and I just had sticks leaning up against it.
It was infested with rats. It was quite a horrible place to live. It needed a lot of work.
The farm has since been sold on, but in the 1990s, the children knew it as their home. Laura Richards has come to the area to try to understand why Spry chose this as a place to live.
So there's certainly a sense of remote isolation here, just in terms of the geography itself, where the house is located, that they have no other social network around them. So even if they were to run away, where would they go? Who would they tell? There was no one really in their immediate lives other than her.
Eunice has 2 other children, Judith, who's her biological daughter, and Charlotte, who she adopted at birth. They're given special treatment. Aloma, Chris and Victoria are banished to the barns.
It was scary at night in the outbuildings because you could hear things scuttling around. The only lights, I suppose, was from the kitchen window, and it was just pitch black. Completely pitch black.
Victoria and I lived in an old mobile home, and it had no electric, had no water. We used to use a hose pipe to try and clean ourselves. Half the time I'd be sleeping out in the field or in the chicken sheds, and you'd wake up and there'd be a rat on your chest.
I hated it. It was like being taken over to an island where nobody could come and save you or help you.
They're just young children, and they're petrified.
I found foxes really eerie. They're sort of like barks. And then there was the screech owl that can make you really jump.
With the children hearing all these noises and being scared and feeling really isolated and terrified, that would drive them to want to be in the house, to want to be with Spry. So she's sort of their saviour as well as the person who's torturing them. And this must have been, a real conflict for the children of the very person that they should be with who's comforting them is the very person who's creating this awful environment for them to survive.
But Spry doesn't just want to scare the children, she wants to make them feel utterly desperate.
There was very little food, and I used to eat chicken pellets, try and survive.
The hunger, it wasn't like you're not having your dinner tonight. Seriously, you're not eating for 3 months. And I remember as a little girl, 8 and 9, my legs dragging behind me, exhaustion. I will never forget it. I lived half my childhood fantasising about eating food. I was so hungry. And if she could clearly see if we'd eaten something, she would make us vomit in front of her and say, "What have you eaten?" You'd vomit and she goes, "Right, you want to eat that? You can get and eat that up as well."
Making sure that her children are starving means that they're constantly and perpetually reminded of her control. They never feel nurtured. She wants them to be reminded all the time of what disgusting creatures they are and how they don't deserve love and how they deserve to be punished. She's so deluded about the role she has in their life that she feels that starvation is an appropriate way of reminding them, firstly, how powerful she is, and secondly, how worthless they are.
3 little children, scared and hungry, almost every day of their lives. The desperation is too much to bear, and sometimes they try to take food they find lying around. But when they're caught, Eunice's vicious temper explodes.
There was some chocolates on a shelf in her bedroom, and some of them went missing.
She wanted to know who had done it, and she took a chair leg and started beating the tops of our feet. This was me, Aloma and Victoria, and I'm probably 4 or 5 years old at this point. I'm a kid.
And we would just scream in pain and nobody was there to really help us or rescue us.
It was really shocking. I remember being frightened, properly frightened for the first time. It's one of those moments I'm probably never going to forget.
By attacking each child in front of the others and demanding that somebody confesses to stealing food, she's hoping to create divisions. Will one point the finger at another? And by doing that, it will break their bond, and that would give Eunice the absolute power and control that she was striving to achieve.
Eunice's campaign of terror is about to reach a new level. The children realise that the sticks Victoria spotted when she first arrived have a terrifying purpose.
When I used to scream and cry, she'd go and get another stick, and I'd shut my teeth really tight, and she would just smash the stick down my throat. And it ended up, all my teeth were knocked out on a regular basis as a child.
And she would actually put it down the backs of our throats and twist the stick so it cut the back of your throat.
When she pulled the stick out, was trying to, even the saliva, trying to swallow it. And I'd be like that, trying to swallow it because my throat would be raw, absolutely raw, and I couldn't swallow anything.
By using the sticks forcibly down the throats of the children, she was letting them directly know, do not speak about what I do. And that is such a powerful physical metaphor for the mental torture that they were experiencing on a day-to-day basis.
I just remember giving up, really, at that age. There was almost no fight left. There was nothing else I could do to stop what was going on. I couldn't breathe or anything, but it was almost a bit of a relief because I couldn't move, couldn't do anything. I just had nothing left in me to fight with, really. And that was going on 2-3 times a day.
This is the saddest part of children who are abused, the fact that they learn to believe that this is what they deserve, that they don't try to fight it because they're so used to it, and that finally they actually would choose potentially to die to get out of that situation.
It was excruciating, but I did learn to switch off. You'd concentrate on the crack in the ceiling and take your mind to a different place. It was so painful that you did just shut down. We were like dummies and you just didn't really fight back.
It was a mind game for her. There'd be no anger, there'd be no emotion. Sometimes she'd even smile. She liked what she was doing. It was almost like it was her goddamn right to do it.
Well, the more frequent and the more the violence and abuse happens, escalation occurs with it too. We know that about violence and abuse. And of course, it just becomes a way of life.
Just as the children think things can't get any worse, Eunice comes up with another cruel torture tool, which she inflicts on both Christopher and Victoria.
She tied me and my brother up into the bedroom because a chicken nugget went missing. And she said neither one of us were being honest. So she stripped us off clothes and we were tied naked in the bedroom, blindfolded as well. When she took the blindfolds off, we couldn't really see very well. The light used to hurt our eyes. And it was summer, but the house had no heating. It was the big sash windows and the wind was always blowing in, and forever cold.
I was just 7 or 8 years old. I was a little kid.
The room started off with, there was furnishing in there, but Eunice would catch them curled up on the bed, and then she would take the bed away, take the mattress away, and then she'd find them curled up on the carpet, so then she took the carpet away.
That feeling of, I need food, I need water, anything. I remember coughing up blood on the 3rd day. I felt like I was slowly dying.
What we find is a unity occurring. Christopher and Victoria particularly form a bond and get each other through the awful beatings. Now this actually goes against everything that Eunice would have wanted and potentially would increase the abuse that they suffered, but nonetheless, this adversity creates a loyalty to one another.
To see each other at our weakest, that did create a bond that still probably stands today. And in many ways, she didn't kill us. And that's only something that Victoria and I share. We kept each other alive.
The children are now being beaten, starved and abused several times a day, and Spry's methods of abuse are becoming more and more extreme. For the children, the torture is no longer a form of punishment, but part of a frightening and horrendous routine, a routine Eunice seems to be enjoying.
The purpose of that place to me was to only go to torture me, and it was horrible. I mean, it wasn't just that going on. We would be thrown down the stairs, we'd be kicked.
I know Victoria called it the torture farm. It was a place where we went through horrific abuse, and it's a very suitable name.
The children have now been abused for over 10 years, but if they think the worst is over, they would be wrong. Their sadistic foster mother has even worse planned.
There is no way to describe how horrific that was. That is my worst memory of being with Eunice Spry.
In the late 1990s, 3 children are being cared for by Eunice Spry, an evil and sadistic woman they've learnt to call Mum.
There was always dread when we'd hear like the van coming. We got to know the sound of the van. And then it would be like, she's back, everybody back to your places. Just so that we weren't sat doing nothing.
By 2000, Eunice's abuse is at its worst. And now it's Christopher who's feeling the brunt of her temper.
The worst case personally for me was what I've called the van incident. Eunice had a Ford Transit, and one day she tied a rope to the back of the transit van to the rear step and then tied it around my foot. Eunice floored the accelerator on the van and my feet were taken straight out from underneath me. There was a tractor trail with freshly ploughed field next to it, and I got dragged around that field, my head hitting lumps of mud the size of myself, and she drove round this whole field, 13 acres, with me tied behind. I blacked out multiple times. I was bleeding all over. I kept waking up and I was still being dragged. Then she just took the rope off the van at the end and I couldn't move. I physically couldn't move. My body had just had enough. It just destroyed me. We're in the middle of nowhere. There's no one to help us. And my siblings came over and dragged me away. I can't remember the next few days. I was really lucky to survive. I probably should have died. And I tell you what, being dragged around that field, I wish I had. There is no way to describe how horrific that was. That is my worst memory of being with Eunice Spry. It's the aftermath, not being able to move my head for a few days just because the pain was so vivid, so horrific. I thought I'd snap my neck. I didn't think I was ever going to walk again. It's something I shouldn't have to be thinking about, but it's something that, has sadly been left to me. That's my legacy, I guess.
Eunice is off the scale as far as her willingness to abuse her children goes. Literally, she takes them to the brink of death.
September 2000. And in a bid to keep up the appearance of a normal family, Eunice takes her children away. It would be a trip that would end in tragedy.
On the way back, there was myself and Aloma were in the minibus with Eunice's parents, and we were on the M5, and Victoria, Charlotte and Judith were in a small Suzuki driving behind, about 10 minutes apart. We got back to Tewkesbury and then wondered what was taking them so long.
Unbeknown to me at the time, there was a 38-ton truck behind us.
How anyone survived this crash is almost beyond belief. A multiple pile-up on the M5 near Weston-super-Mare, a car crushed between two juggernauts. Judith Palmer, who was 37, and her 16-year-old sister, Charlotte Spry, were killed. But in the back seat of the car, their younger sister lived.
I don't really remember the initial bang, I just remember waking up afterwards. From the injuries and from what I saw, they were clearly dead, but I don't think it hit home, and I was calling to them to wake up. I was screaming out, begging them to wake up, and they weren't answering.
There was a phone call. And there'd been a very bad accident.
Eunice put her head in her hands. She was stomping around going, why?
In my head, I thought everyone was dead. And I went outside and started praying.
I was in intensive care for a month. I broke my arms, my legs, my hips, my pelvis. I had serious blood loss, serious internal injuries.
Eunice breaks the news that her two elder children, Judith and Charlotte, are dead.
I remember bursting into tears and she wasn't crying, and I thought this was really odd. She said it so sort of like matter of fact.
She said everything was going to be all right, and then it turned very sour. She kept saying very slowly to Aloma and myself that we should have been in that car, not Charlotte.
I'm thoroughly convinced that she totally believed that we were the devil's kids, and that's why we were spared.
Victoria is in a coma for weeks. When she comes round, the story hits the news. And Eunice takes the opportunity to play her part as a perfect, caring mother.
I've just left the hospital once to go to the funeral, and ambulance took me and brought me back, and I've not left since.
How are the two of them shaping up? You must be very pleased with their pregnancy.
Oh, they're really good now in comparison to what they were. Victoria's still in a lot of pain, but she is on the road to recovery now.
This Jekyll and Hyde approach we do see, and I think what's absent on her face there is that genuine emotion. She doesn't look as if she's that grieving parent who's just lost two children and, you know, by the bedside of the other who she's really concerned about of, you know, whether Victoria's going to pull through.
But away from the cameras, Eunice is true to form.
She used to tell me even then, she said, you're not to talk to anybody when the nurses come in, you're not to talk to anybody. So again, like when I was a little girl, I would not say anything when she was around and say something when she wasn't around. And of course this was picked up on. My mum was questioned about it. Why is she never talks when you're in the room, what's going on?
She seemed to be sort of like just going through the motions of being there.
And then she shut the curtain and then came in and held my windpipe. Told me that I was a sly bitch and I was not doing as I was told.
I don't think Eunice was that bothered if Victoria was going to live or not.
And then she said to me, see, the devil looks after his own. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, well, why is it my two beautiful daughters have died while scum like you are still breathing? And I just remembered not wanting to be here anymore. I didn't know why I was here. I wanted to be dead, so I didn't want to be here anymore.
Being in hospital could be the chance for Victoria to be saved. But Spry has an evil plan. A plan to punish Victoria just for surviving.
The orthopaedic surgeons and physiotherapists said that I should be walking within 3 to 4 months. But she said that I'd caused the accident, so I stay in the wheelchair. And I just remember thinking that was the least I could do for her after what I'd just done.
She really didn't need to be in the wheelchair as long as she was, and Eunice was keeping her in for her own reasons.
She told me not to cooperate, and they would try and get me to get up and walk, and I had to just, it was just so frustrating. And I had to sort of like go against these people that were trying to help me, and I wanted to be helped, but I couldn't because I had to do what she said, and it was just awful.
We kind of just all accepted the fact that Victoria was very ill and she was probably going to be in a wheelchair all her life, and I used to push her everywhere.
4 years pass. Victoria is still forced to be in a wheelchair. Unable to escape, she continues to suffer at the hands of Eunice.
If at home she saw me even trying to get up and walk, she would take the feet pieces off my wheelchair, and they were metal, and she would slam them into my shins. I wanted to walk, but I couldn't. Frightened too.
Eunice has now been abusing the children for 18 years. She's becoming bolder and braver with the injuries she's inflicting.
She pulled me out of the wheelchair by my hair, and then she got some sandpaper and she sandpapered my chest and my face.
When Victoria is 18, Eunice allows her to get a job, babysitting.
Eunice feels that Victoria is so controlled that even when she's going out with injuries, she's not going to talk to anybody about them. And this means that she feels that she is complicit now within that abuse, that Victoria has accepted her fate and won't do anything about it.
People were seeing me, black eyes, bruises all over my face swollen up, cut. When they asked me what was going on, she said, you to tell them that your brother's really violent and he's done it to you. I felt so wrong. It wasn't him that had been doing it, it was her.
For the first time in her life, Victoria begins to see how normal teenagers live.
I was seeing people my age, their mothers treat them with so much respect. I remember people asking one girl an opinion, and I was like, you ask her opinion, don't you just tell her? no, she can do what she wants, you know, she's a young woman. And I found that quite eye-opening, that these people were allowed an opinion and that people my age were allowed choices and opinions.
The fact that Victoria is starting to interact with other people who are kind and who have children, means that she possibly starts to shift what she believes is appropriate behaviour. So she starts to potentially challenge that the actions that Eunice is inflicting on her are not the actions that are inflicted on everybody else. And this may give her a certain amount of confidence to start talking about what's happened to her when questioned by caring adults.
And this chap came in the back and said, please, we need to know, we want to help you. What is going on? Please just tell us. You are 18, they said to me. We won't tell anybody if it's not what you want us to do. Tell us what's going on. And I just burst into tears and told them about the sticks down the throat. As soon as I said that, I burst into tears because I thought, oh my God, I just got into so much trouble. And guilt, I was just eaten up with guilt that I'd got her into trouble and I was supposed to try and save her and protect her.
Finally, after almost 2 decades, Spry's dark and sadistic side is revealed. Victoria has spoken out. But after years of physical and mental abuse, will the 3 teenagers ever really be free of Eunice and the control she has over them?
We denied everything. I knew no different. There wasn't anything else but Eunice in my life. She was still our mother, even though she'd done a lot wrong.
It's the year 2005, and Victoria Spry, now 18, has finally revealed the secret she's been keeping for almost 2 decades. Her foster mum, Eunice Spry, has been physically and emotionally abusing Victoria and her 2 siblings, Christopher and Aloma. Aloma has already moved out, and at last, it seems Victoria could be about to be saved.
I rang these friends, panicked, and they came and got me very quickly. They took me to another friend's house around the corner, and they looked after me for a good few weeks, and that was the start of me rebuilding everything, my life, really. She quickly found out where I was. It was just terrifying.
Even when Victoria has actually escaped Eunice's household, the reality is Eunice does not let go. In fact, she starts to send cards to Victoria, which suggests that she loves her and misses her, and she starts to really manipulate those emotions. Now, from Victoria's point of view, this is potentially the one thing she's been waiting for all her life, to realise that her mother does love her, and that's going to create a huge sense of disloyalty, which is exactly what Eunice wants. Eunice wants Victoria to feel torn, because the last thing that Eunice desires is for her to go to the police.
For the first time in my entire life, she was saying, I loved you. It was tearing me to pieces. I'd never heard her say, I love you, and I suppose that's what I needed to hear. As a little girl, I was, I just wanted to make her proud and happy. And she very nearly, if I hadn't been strong enough, nearly convinced me to go back. She was telling me for the first time that she loved me and she was sorry for what she'd done.
Finally, Victoria goes to the police, though her nightmare is far from over.
I had no other option, I think, ultimately. I thought, no, you've got to do this. You've come this far. They arrested her. I got a phone call a couple of hours later and they said she's not admitting anything.
Meanwhile, Christopher is taken to safety.
Eunice had always told us that if the police came to get us, it would be because they don't like Jehovah's Witnesses, and it was all to do with Armageddon and things. And so even though I was 16 at the time, I was sticking to this plan, and we denied everything. I knew no different. There wasn't anything else but Eunice in my life.
That's sort of the Stockholm syndrome, that she's the person causing the abuse, but she's also sort of the rescuer as well.
And she said, they're not saying anything. They're not saying anything that's happened. If they don't say anything, at the end of the day, they can go back home. And I thought, oh my gosh. And she said, they're not talking to anyone, they don't trust anybody. Can we come to you?
We were taken to see Victoria, and when I arrived there, she got out of the bed and walked to me. That was enough. I puked everywhere. It was one of the freakiest encounters I've ever had in my life. And she kept saying, you have to tell them everything that happened.
I looked at him straight in the eye. I said, I can't go back. I said, I've had enough. I'm not going back.
Eventually, I did agree to do another police interview, and start the ball rolling towards a prosecution.
March 2007, 21 years after the abuse first started, Eunice Spry goes on trial to face a catalogue of charges.
She didn't show any emotion or anything, she just stared straight ahead. I remember looking, some of the jewellery were crying. I just felt really scared.
I generally think she thought she was going to win, or she just didn't care. She was almost happy to be reminded of how much abuse and how much torture she'd put me through. It was a very frightening moment.
On March the 20th, 2007, Eunice Spry is convicted of 26 charges, including unlawful wounding, cruelty to a person under 16, assault, occasioning actual bodily harm, perverting the course of justice, and witness intimidation. She is later sentenced to 14 years in jail.
His Honour Judge Simon Darwell Smith told Spry this was the worst case of its kind he'd ever heard in his 40 years' experience. He told her she was guilty of sadistic torture.
It was a closing of the book, the final chapter. It was the end of Eunice Spry. The end of my hell, the end of all my problems.
I just fell to the floor in tears, and it wasn't because everybody kept saying to me, do you feel like you've won? And I didn't quite know why people were saying that. And I said, no, I just feel safe. Somebody's going to pick her up and take her away. She can't hurt me anymore.
I'm not scared of her. She's a little frail old lady. She still, I think, could possibly have a psychological hold on me and could probably still make me feel nervous, but definitely not scared.
I've heard her being called Britain's most sadistic mother, and while that is true, that would seem to suggest she was a mother at all, and to me, she doesn't even deserve that. A mother wouldn't beat down her own children. A mother could not lack the respect for human life in the way she did.
To take somebody's life and control it and manipulate it and to destroy somebody right from an innocent age is just unforgivable, absolutely unforgivable.
She's a thief. Because she stole my childhood. She stole my chance to better myself in life. She's stolen my health. She has stolen my sleep. She has destroyed everything that she could, and she's ruined my life. She's a torturous, evil, twisted person. A psycho, which we're very lucky hasn't killed someone.
I want to tell my story to help others, really. That you can, however bad your situation is, you can get out and there is help out there. I'm working with social services to try and improve things. I don't think we will ever get rid of Eunices of this world, but I think we can close the net in on them, and I think we can use experiences to help do that. I want to build a safe place for children or young adults that have come from abuse. I want there to be more support out there.
Life is great. I've got a new baby, a loving partner, and my 10-year-old daughter, and life just bumbles along normally how it should be. You know, school routines, and yeah, finally have some normality.
I've had the world taken away from me, and then I've been given a second chance. I have a list of things I'd like to do, as does every 25-year-old, I think. My list is a little bit more spiritual, probably, than most. I don't want to jump out of planes, I don't want to do a parachute jump, I don't want to do any of that. I just want to do things that the average child got to do. I want to take my GCSEs. I want a chance at going to university. I want to watch cartoons. I want to catch up on the millions of films I've missed out on. These are things that normal kids take for granted. And I've got a lot of catching up to do, but I'm enjoying the challenge.
Following the conviction of Eunice Spry, Gloucester County Council apologised for their shortcomings. In June 2014, Spry was released from prison after serving less than 8 years of her 14-year sentence.